Thanks very much for coming today. All right, I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melanie Roberts. I'm Executive Director of the Washington State Academy of Sciences, and thanks for joining. This is the fourth Growing with AI webinar that's exploring how artificial intelligence can contribute to a resilient, secure, and economically viable future for agriculture in Washington. Note that we are recording these webinars and we'll make them, along with any speaker slides, available on our website afterward. Today, we're going to dig into the topic of AI for optimization of agriculture inputs, water, fertilizer, pesticides, labor, and so on. Really, really grateful to today's speakers for their participation today, and also to the Washington Department of Agriculture for helping to support this webinar series. And thanks to our planning committee members, some of whom you will see on video today. They're going to monitor your questions and comments and participate in the questions and answers. So they'll be helping to track themes that cut across multiple webinars like workforce, the environmental impacts, data needs, and so on. But before we started, we were actually really interested to know a little bit more about who's here today. So my colleagues are going to launch a Zoom poll. We're trying this for the first time, just to find out a little bit more about you. Where are you coming from and what experience do you have with AI tools? So hopefully you all see that in the side. If you don't, please raise your hand. Go ahead and click. There's just 2 questions, and I'm going to count to 10. And then we will go ahead and see who's here. 8, 9, 10. Let's see, who's here? We've got a real mix of people. Look at that. So about a third of you are from agriculture. Thanks for joining. Half from other areas. We know there are a lot of researchers, government folks, nonprofits. Oh, and then have you tried using AI tools? Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. Okay, so a third of you have used them in agriculture. Could we ask you please to enter into the chat? So if you go to the bottom, look for the little bubble on your bottom screen called chat. Open that up, and could you share the tools that you're using now? We'd really like to get a sense of what's used out there. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Let's see. We also, as you have the chat open, please keep that open during this webinar. And we want to hear your thoughts. Where do you think AI might be most useful? Where do you see risks that we need to make sure we're talking about? And of course, what questions do you have for the speakers? We will go through all the presentations and then have about a half an hour for a discussion. With that, I think I will turn it over to the host for this webinar. Kelly McLean is Assistant Director at the Washington State Department of Agriculture, and she's also a member of the Planning Committee for this Growing with AI initiative. So Kelly, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Melanie, and welcome, everyone. As Melanie said, I'm Kelly McLean, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I've been at WSDA for about 17 years. I'm the assistant director of a division here called Agricultural Environmental Services. And I also serve as a policy advisor to the director on things like ag technology. So I'm really excited about this session today. I'm excited about the opportunity to talk about future needs and goals and things that could be focused on within the ag space to make AI a tool that could be utilized more easily in the future. Today's topic really hits at something every farmer deals with daily, making the most of limited resources while keeping operations profitable. Let me be direct about where agriculture is right now. Many farms are facing severe economic headwinds, and really this could be a precipice moment for agriculture in Washington state. In this environment, AI can sound like just more noise, another vendor knocking on the door with promises while farmers are focused on survival. But the reality is that farmers have always been optimizers. They're constantly making decisions about what to plant, when to plant, how much water to apply, which fertilizers, what to spray and when to spray, and how to help their workers work safely and efficiently. Every one of those decisions affects a farmer's bottom line. The question before us today is, how can AI help farmers make better decisions about the allocation of resources, and how do you separate the valid tools from the hype? That's what we're here to explore. And we've got four great speakers here who each offer a different perspective in the space. Lav Khot from WSU will start us off with an overview of the agricultural decision cycle. Where are the key points where optimization matters? Then Jonathan Cox, who wears multiple hats as a grower and soil scientist, will share with us what's actually happening on the ground, the practical realities of trying to optimize inputs on working farms. Miel Hostens from Cornell will give us a view from the dairy industry perspective, which has been particularly innovative in adopting AI and data-driven approaches. Miel will also address something critical, the risks and privacy considerations we all need to keep in mind. And Steve Mantle will wrap us up from Innovate Ag. He'll round out our discussion with an industry perspective on the tools that are actually being deployed and what it takes for farms to get AI ready. They will introduce themselves further at the beginning of their presentations, and we'll take the first hour for those presentations, and then the last half hour will be for conversations and questions. As Melanie said, please share any AI tools that you're aware of or use in the chat, along with any questions or comments. We have people tracking that information, and so now I'm going to turn it right over to Lav to give us an overview.
All right, can you hear me, Lily? Okay, thank you, and thanks for having me. Again, I'm Khot with WSU. I put many hats. I'm with WSU Ag WeatherNet, also part of Center for Precision Ag, and also involved in Ag Institute. So my job is very easy, I guess, because all the previous webinars that I have touched on this topic, right? How AI can help optimize ag inputs. Of course, in Washington, we grow many crops, and I'm just going to use apple as a use case and what Kelly touched on, right? So, for example, in apple modern orchard systems, irrigation water, and in particular summer months, has become a big challenge to have the competition from less resources, but then we are using water for irrigation, also to mitigate the heat stress. And with low snowpack and so forth in central Washington, that is a big issue. I'm a student learning about the fertilizers and nutrient optimization in fruit crops, but probably John will talk about this. There's too less and too much. It causes a lot of quality issues for the fresh market apple. Washington sits uniquely, and we have a lot of weather variability, subseasonal weather variation. We knew that it does have effect on the dormancy release and the spring frost used to come. Now with subseasonal weather change in summer, we are getting a lot of heat stress. So there's a lot of resource optimization need for mitigating those stress and energy use there. Of course, it's a fresh market crop, and so we are dealing with a lot of pest management scenarios. And I mean, labor for sure is a big issue. And then now with the cost of labor going up, pruning, thinning, harvesting, all those operational cost us a lot of money, right? And then it's hurting the bottom line of our growers, I guess, right? So in next few slides, I just want to touch base on what we are doing and how AI can help in the process, I guess. So as some of you know, we are doing the Smart Orchard funded by Tree Fruit Commission. At this test bed, we are inviting the private entities and WSU researchers, and we are doing several things. So for example, for irrigation, automation and precision side of things, what we have done is we put a lot of sensors, and then there is, from private entity, there is a climatic model that kind of makes a decision looking at the soil plant weather data and then forecasted weather, and then drives the control bus there to control the automation, irrigation automation. And what we have shown is we can save between 20 and 52% water as we do this and still have a good quality fruit, I guess, right? And so, and if we can do that, so then maybe now it's time for AI to come in and take larger data sets in and then further dial in the water saving and also harvest quality attributes there, I guess, right? And also, as we talk about automation and control, I think there is cybersecurity aspect that we need to think about as well, I guess, right? Same thing with heat stress, with simple use of sensor and growers deciding the threshold on when to start the fogging and when to stop, and then that control system driving that bus, we could save up to 50% water there. Again, just like the irrigation, AI can again ingest more data, more spatial temporal data to some extent, and dial further in on this aspect. And we know that irrigation and heat in particular, it affects the quality and the pack out at the end of the day, right? So I think AI has a huge role to play in this domain actually. And again, what need to happen is we need the data from spatiotemporal domains, and WSU and other players are getting there. I will touch base towards the end of this on that. So another, again, in terms of heat stress, how AI can help in terms of resource planning for small and mid-sized farmers is knowing when the stress is coming for next 7 days. And I think we have the weather, we can improve the weather forecast. And at the same time, if we have AI-driven models, which is one of the case here, what AgWeather has done is like tie the weather and then better forecast the fruit or berry temperature for next 7 days. And that hourly resolution, then smaller mid-sized grower would know when we need to mitigate the stress and do we have enough resources for that, water or any other surround or such, crop protection scenarios that are there. So, and then because growers can use this app and then collect the data, that data again improves this, the models that again AI needs a lot more data, right? And then we can make these models cultivar specific and so forth. And yeah, so that's, I think AI has huge role to play from this point forward. Okay, let me see why my slide is not going forward. I think Anand talk about this a little bit. The frost is a known issue, and in fact, AgWeatherNet came into the picture for Washington State because growers wanted to know that different valleys, how the temperature drops are going to happen and are happening. And so with better weather forecasting and coming from the valleys to the weather station, and then knowing when to mitigate the frost, and then as we are mitigating the frost, for example, knowing that when we run the wind machines to pull the warmer air pull down there to increase the bud temperature, knowing that if there is warm air up there or not, and having that better forecasting of the inversion scenarios. um, Again, we are doing already some of this with AI ML, and a lot more can be done. Again, as we think about these lot more data sets and like automated control systems, I think we also need to think about the cybersecurity, and I think AI can play some role there. In tree fruit, crop load is a big issue in terms of managing several things. We need to know the blossom, green fruit variation, and then do the chemical applications. We have machine vision systems and some AI ML used in going forward. We can improve the accuracies of these prescription maps and dialing on the like not only 2D but 3D aspects of the tree, and then applying the chemicals in targeted zones. I think the AI has a role to play also, from going from the third party vendors, like as we are creating prescription maps and loading it on the sprayer, there is that issue of the data transfer happens in the cloud, and then some bad actors can poison the prescription map and so forth, and there's that cybersecurity aspect that also need to be tackled in, I guess, right? And I think Miel is going to talk about this, but another flavor for dairy industry, probably because Washington has a lot of those. We are helping in terms of like tying this cattle comfort, for example, and saying for next 7 days how the cattle comfort is going to be, and then change the diet of the cattle so that there is better yield at the same time, no mortalities and all those things. As we go forward, I guess, right, AI needs better data. So having some kind of weather and then emission sensing scenarios that quantify, localize emissions, and then grower then optimizes, or the farmer, dairy farmer, optimizes this the diets of the animals so that there is less emissions and still have better yield. Some of those aspects that I wanted to touch, have the flavor of that in this discussion. So I would conclude with this, that we are going to make switch, and again, AI is not everything. AI is a piece of the puzzle, I guess, right? There is sensing, there is control system. In between, we have the previously developed models and machine learning scenarios, and then AI is just going to improve that aspect, right? So in the process, I think where we need to go to make our stakeholders ready is we need to educate stakeholders for given use cases, that the pain points that they have, what type of data AI or ML would need, I guess, right? And then metadata. We need to also create data centers. AgWeatherNet, for example, is a public data center to some extent, but then spray records and other scenarios that cannot be public. We need to create these public-private partnership-driven data centers, and then AI/ML interface comes forward, pulls the public-private data, and then makes the decisions, actuate the things, I guess, right? And the last piece there is that growers, again, there's a lot of noise with AgTech, and then same thing with AI. So we need the test beds, and Tree Food Commission, for example, has showed us the path, I guess, right? So we need to have these commercial test beds where we have WSU and other like private partners can deploy these sensors, deploy the AI/ML driven control systems, and educate growers about good and bad things about this, how it works, so that there is better adoption of this AI infused technology. I would say not just AI, I guess, right? So with that, I'll stop. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Love. Next up is Jonathan Cox, who's going to bring us down to earth with what's actually happening on working farms.
Hey, sounds good. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate your time, Lav. I always love learning from you. I think in a fun spirit here, I asked AI, help give me a joke to start with. So here's what it gave me. Okay. So the Seahawks just proved that if your defensive front is strong enough, you don't need fancy plays. You just control the line of scrimmage and win. Agriculture is the same. Good soil data and good eye don't look flashy, but they quietly shut down waste, reduce pressure on your costs, and suddenly you're holding the trophy. So I'm on cloud nine after a Seahawks victory this week. So I hope you guys are too. It's been a great week. So just a quick introduction on myself. So I work with a lot of farmers. I spend most of my time working in an apple packing house and out in a warehouse. And I like to say that I'm farming adjacent. So I'd like to talk a little bit about just some of the tools that I've seen. And I wish I had some really good, tangible recommendations to say, hey, this tool is good for this tool is there for that. But I just don't, we're not there yet. And so what I would like to encourage you guys to think about is we think about how to use AI in agriculture. Think about, we're just in the first quarter right now. We're just getting started, and there's a lot of really cool things and a lot of real opportunities that exist. And I think what's going to happen is the farmers of all sizes that are able to find out how to plug in AI, like Lav said, it's not going to be a replacement. It's just going to be an augmentation. So the farmers that are able to find out how that works, I think are going to have some really good advantages there. So I spent 2025 living in Kyrgyzstan. Picture behind me is an apple orchard that I consulted with. And I want to tell you guys about two use cases of AI that we used over there that I think are just examples of how AI can be used in agriculture for actual farmers. So Kyrgyzstan is quite a bit different than the United States in that we don't have over there, there's not access to good soil lab data. There's just not. There's not the infrastructure. They also don't have a really strong research network. So in terms of agricultural expertise, it just doesn't exist, right? They have some professors in some universities, but the what we have in the United States just it gave me appreciation for the extension agents and everything that USDA ARS does, because they don't really have that over there. And so the question is, how do you bridge that gap? How do you get knowledge into the hands of farmers and data into the hands of people that can use it? So what we started with is we started with trying to build a model of how to get soil test data into the hands of farmers. Where for us in the United States, we look at it, and I think most of you that are farmers would know, I mean, you probably soil test pretty regularly. You have a consultant you work with, and you have some kind of sampling plan. And if you don't, then I would encourage you to do that. But I would assume that most growers do that. And so what we found over there is, even if we get them soil test data, they don't know what to do with it. And that's where I think it becomes powerful, is how do you do that? So what we did is we leveraged ChatGPT, and we started pounding the ground for all the research we could find on fertilizer recommendations in Central Asia. We use that as I think AI can be really good as a knowledge recall tool. So we use that over there. And then we took it the next step, and we tried to build an agent using ChatGPT where we could then upload soil test data and then have it spit out fertilizer recommendations. And we're about 90% of the way there. That project's still underway, but I just want to show you that that's an example of something that I think AI can do very well. Now, in the meantime, what we've built is we've built a very fancy spreadsheet that can do all these calculations for us, but it's got limitations, right? And the problem is, if I build a spreadsheet and then share it with somebody else, they have to learn how I built it, know all the tools and all the formulas and stuff like that. Where AI, you don't have to do that. AI, you can function as a chat bot, and you can just say, hey, okay, I'm going to use, here's my soil test data. It can read a PDF. You just upload the soil test data, say, hey, here's the units, here's the what I did, and then it will spit out a fertilizer recommendation. And what you have to do is you have to ground truth it. And so what I use that as an example, and also as an encouragement for farmers out there to know that you guys are the experts. You know different things that you know how to farm. No one needs to tell you guys how to farm. Just use AI as a tool to help you farm better. And what you can do is if you've been wanting to test AI to know a little bit more, okay, well, what are its limitations? What can it do well? I would encourage you to pick something that you're very confident in and then feed it some data, feed it some information, and then see what kind of results out of it. And if the results are maybe not what you expect and they're not very good, then try again, keep going, because I think this iterative process is going to be something that helps. Example two is about chemical usage. So I met with some farmers in rural Kyrgyzstan that had a problem with potato blight. It was pretty bad. And so in order to properly diagnose the problem, what we did is we took pictures of the potato disease plants. We uploaded them to AI and confirmed that, hey, we were trying to figure out what is the disease here, confirmed that it was late blight. I also, just as a ground truth myself, I called an agronomist friend of mine in Washington and said, hey, can you confirm, does this look like late blight? And then what we were able to do is figure out, okay, it is late blight. Now let's come up with a treatment plan. And so in working with my agronomist colleague and with AI, we were able to develop a protocol for these farmers where they, because the interesting thing for me is they actually had the right chemical. They had the fungicide they needed for to treat for this blight, but they had no idea how to use it. They didn't know how to mix it. They didn't know how to apply it. They were just really running blind. And so what we did is we were able to, with the help of Chat GPT, take I wrote a prompt. I used the information I got from my agronomist friend. I wrote a prompt and we were able to come up with a protocol. It was just basically a 2-page protocol that we could give these farmers. It was something they could use. And then not only that, after we done it, I read the protocol, made sure, hey, this makes sense to me. This is a good protocol. The cool thing about it is I could then take that protocol and in 1-sentence prompt, I could translate it into Kyrgyz. And so that was a nice thing too, where, I don't speak Kyrgyz. I'm not able to communicate with these farmers, but I was able to use AI to do that. And so how does that translate to what we can do here in Washington State? I think 2 things. Okay. I think that one, just knowing, like I said before, you guys are the experts and you can use AI to do it. But also, I feel that AI, when used properly, can do a lot of good in a good farm manager's hands. I think that, writing protocols, we're dabbling with, like I said, I work at the Apple warehouse as well. We're dabbling with helping AI help us write protocols for our food safety things, where we used to sit there and comb through Word documents and be like, okay, how do we tweak this? How do we do that? Like using AI to do that. So we use AI, but then we make sure that the result actually makes sense. You have to have that human element there to keep it in check. So I just use that as 2 really good examples of they're very simple. Okay. They're very simple, rudimentary examples, but things that I would just encourage you to try it. Like I said, we're in the first quarter and there's a lot of tools out there. In preparation for this talk, I read about so many different tools that are out there and they're very good. But the thing is we know is I think it's hard as a farmer to know which tools are worth your time and investment, because that's the thing. We know that we have some economic pressures. We know that that a lot of these things will cost money, and so you want to get the best return for your investment. So what I would encourage you to do is start with a language learning model. Start with a chat bot. See what you can learn from there. The other thing that I think AI can do very well is it can help bridge the gap between data silos. For example, if we use the packing house example. So the farmers operate independently of us, and they have their data on their servers and so forth. And even at the packing house data, we have our storage data, we have our pack out data, we have all these different data silos. And so what we've been doing at the packing house is we've been able to bring those data silos together, just building AI pipelines for them. And that's really helpful for us. That helps us work with our farmers to know, hey, these are mostly apples I'm talking about. So we know the size profile of the incoming fruit. We know when it's going to be coming in. And then on the backside, we know some of the things about storability. So it's just by bringing all these data silos together, that's where I think AI can have a huge impact. Now, one thing that Lav talked about that I think is very important that I would like to just put out there is the importance of a public-private partnership, especially with AI. Like I said, we're we're at the beginning of this. And I think that we in Washington State are uniquely positioned to be leaders. I really think it's really great that the Academy of Sciences is putting these webinars together, because if you look at our state as a whole, it's awesome. All right. We have all the tech on the coast, we have all the farming in the middle. And I think, okay, how can we bring our people together? Okay, not just through a Seahawks victory, but also through leveraging and combining AI and agriculture. I think it's a great opportunity. So what would a public-private partnership look like? I want to talk a little bit about what happens in the cherry industry. Okay, the cherry industry has given us a model for something that can work really well. So, for example, the Northwest Cherry, so Cherry Commission, has put together a system where growers and others report their fruit estimates to a third party. Okay, that third party then anonymizes the data and then comes up with estimates for, okay, here's the size of what the cherry crop's going to look like this year. And how that works is you have all the growers and the packers and the sales desks all working together. They give this data to the third party. That third party has a contract with the fruit commission to not profit off that data, but basically be the steward of that data, and then use that data so then we can basically try to hopefully move more cherries, right? So we can have that dialogue with our retail partners and be like, hey, here's what the Washington cherry market's looking like. Here's what you can plan in advance for. What I would like to propose and get people to start thinking about as we're doing this webinar is we can do the same thing with AI. As Lav talked about, and as you'll hear some of the other speakers talk about, in order to make these models really good, you need very good data. And if you have good data coming in, you can have good results coming out. So if we have a public, like a public benefit corporation or something like that, where we can help growers and anonymize their data and protect it, because that's one of the tricky parts, right? Is you want to, is growers, as a farmer, my data is mine. I'm really hesitant to share it with other people because I don't want it to be held against me. You know what I mean? I want to be able to use my data for my own things, and I don't want retailers or auditors to be able to weaponize it against me. And so we have to be really sensitive of that. And that's why I think something like a public benefit corporation is something that could work. It would have to come from a commission level, from a top-down approach, where we could unify. And then because think of the power if we could get all the weather data, all the soil data, all these other things into one packet, and then we could basically come up with an AI model for growing the best cherries in the world. Right? We already know we can grow really good cherries here in Washington, but I think what we can do is there's little things we can do to grow a little bit better. So I hope that was helpful. Those are just some of the use cases that I've seen in AI. And once again, we are really at its infinite stages. And so honestly, I just want to reiterate again, if you're a farmer or something and you want to bounce off ideas, let me know. But what I would just encourage you to do is get out there and try something. Just try starting with Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever you have access to, and do something safe, something that you know the answer to already. Feed AI a prompt and then see what comes out of it, and have some fun. Take a soil test. If you have soil test data, upload it and say, hey, interpret this soil test data to me, see what it comes up with. And I think that's the start of a good thing. So appreciate your guys' time. That's where we're at, and good luck. And I hope to be able to see where this thing goes. I think we're in a great position in Washington State.
Thank you, John. I just want to, before we move on to our next speaker, I just want to reiterate that John's examples show that AI tools are not necessarily the most expensive thing available. That, some of the things that are being mentioned are options that are available to every farmer, regardless of size. And you can start with that initial step that John just talked about. And there's no necessarily output of cost associated with that first try. So next, we have Miel Hostens from Cornell, who will share insights from the dairy industry, which has been at the forefront of AI adoption, and importantly, address some of the risks and privacy concerns we need to be aware of. And I think you're coming to us from the farthest away today. So thank you so much for being with us.
No problem. You hear me well? Yes. Slide should pop up, correct?
Neil, you sound a little far away. Your sound's a little soft.
I'll pick up.
That's better. That's better. Thank you.
Perfect. I am currently indeed overseas. I was in London for a global meeting this week. So I'm indeed Miel
You're still
Hostens.
pretty quiet, Neil. Like,
I just,
I need a sound check. Sound check, check.
yeah, I am available. Can you hear me well or not? Was it difficult to hear me?
You just sound a little quiet.
I will go as close as I can to
That's
the.
There you
better.
go. That is
Yeah,
much
that's
better.
better.
All
Thank
right,
you.
perfect. So, um, I'm going to talk indeed from a different perspective, which is the dairy perspective. For those people who have no idea who I am, I'll quickly introduce myself. So I was born on a dairy farm, second generation, let's say, but I was always quite technically challenged by my parents. So I eventually became a veterinarian with a PhD that now has unlimited access, let's say, to technology and AI. Next to 5 different natural languages, I probably speak over 5 different computer languages, work with smallholder farms and some of the largest dairies in the world. I feel extremely responsible for the planet, given the methane from our cows. And I always joke that one of my things to try to save the planet is that I only have 2 kids. So that's my kind of contribution. A bit of disclosure, I've been active as an academic entrepreneur. So I've already had 2 spin-offs from university that were building on, let's say, big data and sensor technologies. And I've been always active in this field of trying to also convert what I'm doing in the academic world into things that exist in the field so that it's really practically usable for farmers. So where AI actually adds value in the dairy, I always use this graph. I saw this for the big data as well, and that is we have the Gartner hype cycle. There is definitely at this moment an extreme technology trigger in the dairy industry or in any other, let's say, farming industry. But I think what we should be aware is that we're still having to go to the peak of inflated expectations, and we're definitely overpromising what's happening in the AI world. So to give you an idea, so I have been working a lot with farm management data, which is raw data on the farms. I've been working with omics data, biomarker data from cows, precision livestock farming technology, so that's wearables. Vision is extremely hot. Precision agriculture, all those data sources, they kind of come into play, yeah, and we generate an enormous amount of data. But the problem is that if we ever want to go to knowledge and wisdom on the right side, yeah, we will need to do a lot of things better, in my opinion. And AI is maybe a tool that can help, but it's definitely not the holy grail, in my opinion. So to give you an idea, this is my lab at Cornell University. The people with a round are at this moment active. The other people, let's say they did a PhD with me or a master's. And so each of them are, let's say, or working on the raw data side, or they're working on real world implementations, or more on the computer science. So I have animal science, dairy science, vet science, computer science in my lab all over. To give you a little bit of a feeling, what we have in our industry is a lot of these things at this stage. So this is an example, for example, about a Facebook model that we fit on top of camera data from cabs to detect specific behavior. Yeah. This is something that almost on a weekly basis, there are people coming to me asking, look what we can do. The toolkit that AI has provided has exploded and even made it possible for people to analyze non-proprietary data in a way that is, let's say, unseen before. Because previously you had to have a sensor from a company, and then the company didn't want to give you the data, but now you can install your own camera on top of animals and you can start analyzing it and trying to predict the phenotypes, let's say behavior, for example. The other thing that it's funny is that we can even think about data being generated from satellites. So this is an open data set that we are using at this moment to try to see if we can measure methane emissions from a dairy farm. And as you can see, this is data from an open, publicly available data set where we're analyzing whether we can relate what is happening on farm to the emissions that we can measure through satellites. Some people might have known the Methane Sat initiative. We have added some resources there to try to see if we can measure methane exhausts from dairies in a less invasive way using satellite. So these are some of the things that we can do nowadays on the left side, which were unavailable, let's say, before AI came in, or it was not so easy to analyze. But I really would like to invite people always to think about the right side, and that is make data into real world evidence. In my case, I want to have better understanding of the genotype by environment interaction in animals. I want to have precision phenotypes. I want to have predictive health. I want to have surveillance of farms. I want to have digital twins of farms, so I don't need to have animals in my simulations anymore. And virtual coaching at different levels, even up to the policy making, could be done, yeah, let's say, using AI. I'm going to show you some examples that we've been doing. So, for example, this is a paper that we published recently where we used residuals from an AI network to see if what we thought initially about cow behavior, if this was valid. And the funny thing is that with AI, what we learn a lot is that old hypotheses really don't always hold anymore. So real-world evidence for that. A prediction model using an AI, the deep learning network that was already published some years ago, where we try to predict milk yield and then use the deviations from it to monitor animals and have a new phenotype of interest. This is a publication that we did where we used, again, the milk yield, and converted it into a digital twin for milk yield. So right now we have an AI model which can completely simulate farms for us. Yeah, we can ask questions to it in a way that is unseen. So these kind of applications make sense because we can use it for real-world simulation. My group is now focusing a lot on agentic AI, in which, in other words, you can have language models talk to academic models. We published recently something where we scraped the entire PubMed, and we now created a RAG model that uses the large language model of Facebook, but it adds all of the publications that were ever done in Journal of Dairy Science to it, so that we can now have policymakers, for example, interact with our chatbot, and they bring up the relevant information that was published so far. So instead of having to rely on, let's say, a literature review, we augmented current language models with the, let's say, with the knowledge base from the scientific world. This all sounds very, very nice, but the question is, what makes this so hard to really bring into, let's say, the real world? First of all, this is still a problem. We have data sets which are really separate in our industry, and everybody's guarding them on different computers, different clouds. And in fact, the one that is in problem is the farmer because he cannot integrate. We still have a big problem about identification, because if you ever want to predict things about cows, you need to know who she is. Yeah, people underestimate the fact that I want to be able to tell not only that I'm sick, but also who is sick. We need more standardizations initiatives. We've been working with IDF and ICAR in trying to standardize data sets, sensor technologies, but we get a lot of pushback from the industry. We have definitely signals of inflated expectations, and I want to show you this academic report that was published in Elsevier, where you can see in the discussion where it says, the discussion says literally, I'm sorry, I cannot answer this because I'm an AI language model. In other words, Elsevier, the editor, the reviewers, whoever, they didn't see that this document was written using AI. The problem is that we need to start thinking about other components that the academic world, in my case, didn't think about. And that is, who owns the model that I create an AI model? Is it a multi-university owned model, maybe federally funded? Who owns the data? Because the data is trained on top of, or the model is trained on top of data that is maybe from somebody's privacy. What's the value of this? Should we open source our models by default? Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. How many of the academic models made it to the real world and real world implementations? If we think about AI, everybody says, ChatGPT. But do we have other models in our industry that really, let's say, have shown applications yet? What about model generalization and validation that is urgently needed? Because if it works on one farm and you bring it to another farm, it doesn't mean that it will work. Small and large farms in low and middle income countries, maybe they can benefit what we are doing in a way that is unseen before. We recently published this. This is only published today, in fact, where we had a review where we talk about milking the data for value-driven dairy farming. You can find this paper online for those who want to read a bit more. Lastly, they also talked about, or asked me to talk about privacy-preserving AI. We published this paper in Journal of Dairy Science Communications recently. And what it is, in fact, we are currently building the privacy-preserving network of farms in which we will use federated learning to have all the farm data stay locally at the farm level without the data having to leave the farm, but allowing it to train models in the cloud. NSF funded this last year, and we're now starting our initiative. We're setting up, let's say, our first prototype on farm. With that, I see that my time is up, and I will respect that. If you have more questions, reach out to me at my Cornell email address or on my website of the lab. You can find more information, and I'll be happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you so much. That was a great overview of what's happening and what the potential risks are in this space. Now, Steve Mantle from Innovate Ag will round out our panel with the industry perspective on what tools are being deployed and what it takes to actually implement them. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. So my name's Steve Mantle. I'm with Innovate Ag based out of Washington State. So I'm going to take a bit of a different lens of just coming back from World Ag Expo and starting with kind of the farm reality that's out there at this point. Attendance was down at World Ag Expo, one of the largest World Ag Expos in the world, probably by about 40%. A lot less growers there, and those that were there were really talking about how financially stressed they are. So we know in Washington, we've got specialty crop operations that are under huge profitability pressure with volatile pricing, with labor constraints, water regulation, rising input costs. So I think the question isn't so much how do we use AI, it's really how do we protect margin? And then AI is a tool that kind of ties into that. So I'm going to start by bringing us into a lens from a CFO or an ownership point of view. And this is for a example blueberry farm that's based up in Mount Vernon, Washington. And this operation is projecting, say, roughly 1,200 tons for the year. But I can look at a glance kind of what historically my revenue has been over the past 5 years, pull all of that together and use LLMs and that type of thing to help assemble some of that data. But what it really comes down to, one of the big pressures in Washington State and Oregon on blueberries is around how much goes off to fresh versus how much goes off to process. And so I can see kind of my default there is I have roughly 58% or so that typically is going off to fresh. And I can move this slider just a little bit and say if I can move this up, say 10%, well, that's another $200,000 in my bottom line, right? And on the revenue piece. Conversely, the other way, it can really go sideways fast where I can go a couple $100,000 in the negative the other way. And now at a glance, I want to be able to kind of look at how am I looking, again, kind of CFO type lens. Am I ahead of the curve compared to historical years? Am I behind when it comes to the phenology progression or basically maturity of my block? So I can look at this and say, great, am I ahead? At this point, I think I actually am about 4 days ahead of the 5-day growing degree type data. The theme that you'll kind of hear me coming back to throughout this is pulling from, let's say, kind of gold grade data. WSU Ag WeatherNet would be a good example of that, right? And these are weather stations that are managed by the state and meteorologists, and I know I can count on them, and that's feeding and growing degree days, and ultimately kind of a multiplier on really understanding where I am with regards to risk as I go along the way here. My labor data is all about pulling in from my work tracking system that I have on farm, and again being able to use that to really tell in real time how am I doing versus this time last year, how do I need to progress, and so on and so forth. So as a CFO, I'm also looking at, well, what do my labor economics look like seasonally? And so I may have a budget of say 2 million roughly, and I need to kind of align what my labor costs look like in peak weeks, what that means in terms of the H2A mix versus local and contract. And we've been working with the University of Washington the last couple of years with a PhD candidate, operations management PhD candidate, has a master's in math from MIT, and she's been working closely with us to look at and build a model that can then be used in basically as AI to project on a seasonal basis. How do I better optimize the amount of labor I have based on my peak timing and when they historically have a little bit of idle time and what that looks like. And so that's something that we're also working to kind of bring together that feeds into this, and the numbers that we're seeing is savings of anywhere from 5 to 20% for the season. Now I'm going to switch from CFO view to really your farm manager type of view. And from really what I'm looking at is, all right, what's coming online when? When do I need to harvest? You see, again, I'm tying in a kind of gold level data sources with growing degree day data coming from Ag WeatherNet. But I'm also tying into using AI for computer vision. So in this case, I'm using some sensors that we're providing, or actually GoPros that we're putting on side-by-sides or robots that are going through the orchard, through the blueberry field during the season. And then really starting to show, well, what is the progression look like of how much is at kind of purple stage of the berry, how much is at green stage, and how much is at blue stage, and then projecting how do I optimize my labor and my resources, including my machine harvesters, to be ready to anticipate that and align all of that together. So I can look at that by variety, of course, as a grower that's growing, say, berries or apples. Many growers will do this in specialty crop, is I'll have different varieties along the way that tie in terms of maturity so I can space things out. And then that, of course, informs, great, what does this look like in terms of AI taking a look at this and informing my basically my resourcing on machines versus hand harvest. In blueberries and sometimes in apples as well, you're going through a field typically 2, maybe 3 times. So you can use this by looking at the progression of basically the blue versus purple versus green in each of these blocks, how that's progressing, and again, how I optimize my allocation of labor and machines. And this confidence level is going to improve over time. Why? Because I'm using real-time telemetry where I'm actually putting cameras on the harvesters that is showing what's on the bushes before I harvest, literally in the front of the harvester as it goes through a block, what's going into the tote to show how that's filling up in terms of quality, and then what's left on the bushes behind to inform my next passes, and then even a camera pointing down at the ground to show what's actually down on the ground, right? And it's potentially a loss where I could be optimizing on that. So I kind of tie all of that together in terms of this feeds back into quality. So a grower ultimately is make or break based on their quality and the culls that basically the packing house pushes back on them on. So getting real-time feedback as to what my bruising looks like, what my packing line is actually giving me feedback on, is really key. And so I can tune this along the way, send this out to my ops manager, bring that together, and then finally start looking together, looking at what's my labor look like, because that's typically my biggest cost. For most growers, it's roughly in the 50 to 60% of their cost, sometimes even a little bit more. And so again, we can get feedback as to on a per picker basis where I'm paying peacetime, whether they're actually up working in a harvester or whether they're on the ground doing hand harvest, who are the ones that are performing better? Which crews are doing better? Which are doing worse? Who do I need to send through again to actually get retrained or go off to maybe do something else like weeding or packing based on what their capability is? And ultimately, again, from an economic perspective, really look at your crews and understand, is my margin negative on some of these crews? If it is, I've got to fix something, or it's certainly not sustainable for much long. So I can use AI to kind of come back with maybe what some of those recommended actions are, and then finally start to bring together what does this mean for me around also actions, back to John's earlier point, that I can take around the field in terms of optimizing what's going into the ground, ensuring that I have plants that are less stress. So that's about optimizing my water. It's about optimizing some of my my inputs on fertility side of things. One of our customers, who's Fall Creek Nursery, who does breeding for one of the largest breeders of blueberries in the world, their VP of R&D recently said to me that the biggest thing that he would tell growers that they should optimize, that they're not optimizing well today, is irrigation. Irrigation makes a huge impact in terms of the quality and the storability of the crop. And so, tying in on pulse irrigation and investing in on-farm automation around that capability and a feedback loop as to what's working versus doesn't work is absolutely critical. So closing the loop on profit optimization is key. This kind of gives you a glance at a dashboard as to what that looks like on a day-to-day. And then being able to finally use, this is gonna fight me for a minute. There we go. Here I've basically got a large language model, since many of you said you use ChatGPT and such. This is Gemini. I've got some predetermined questions in here, but I could also ask, what should I think about changing for my irrigation based on quality challenges from this week's harvest? See what it comes back with. Again, it comes down to having kind of gold level trusted data to tie into to the model and be able to and have context of what matters in your farm. So this is coming back with, great, you've got to reduce your irrigation volume. Maybe you actually have too much going on there. Your bricks levels are off versus the norm. This is how it's impacting basically what's coming out on the other side. So that's basically full circle from my side. It's about integrating phenology. It's about integrating labor, stress, pack out, where we enable the signals out in the field to become recommendations. Your recommendations protect margin and bring that all together. And the future really isn't farms asking AI for better advice. It's farms grounding AI in gold level data and turning daily biological signals into financial precision. And when owners can see the stress in the field before it becomes stress on the balance sheet, that's when AI becomes operational. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before we open it up for discussion, some of the key themes I heard across the talks today were what's available now versus what's coming, accessibility across different farm sizes and types, and what does that look like with resources available, and workforce considerations. So given that, while you're submitting comments and questions, as you saw, you can submit them through the chat or through the Q&A tool. I'm going to go ahead and start us off. And we already started down this path, but I'm going to ask the panelists again. If we start practical, what are the AI tools that are on the market right now that you'd recommend farmers try and why? We've already heard a little bit about that, but if each of you would share, that would be great.
I mean, I'll start. I think, I mean, the most common ones. I mean, if you have a subscription to any of them, I mean, Chat GPT, we've talked about. There's Copilot, there's Claude, there's a lot of these more common ones. I would use that as a starting point, just to see from there. That's what I would look at.
Do the rest of you agree? Is it a good starting point? People just start with the tools that are kind of generally available and give it a whirl, right? I mean, I think we've heard this through the other webinars that have been offered, but really the key components of making AI function in whatever your workspace is the human provides information, it asks AI the question, and then human trains the AI to do that better, to analyze it better, and to see where you're at. And so I would agree. I would think, based on what I've seen, that would be a really great spot to start. So now we're going to get into a hard question, which, depending on the size of the farm and operation, this question can be really different. But how can a farm get AI ready? So what does that actually take? So Steve, I mean, you just tackled the question of data, and we have really the polar opposites here, right? We've got dairy, who's been pulling in data for a really long time, that they're able to use some higher level tools for. Steve, we're seeing more of it in this space. John, you gave examples of spaces where they don't have data, and you're just starting to generate that data that you may want to ask questions of. So what are your thoughts in that space? What does it actually take for a farmer, whether they're 2 acres or 2,000 acres, whether they're specialty crops or something else? What does it take for them to get AI ready?
I mean, I'll have a go at it. I think it really comes down to gold level data, right? So AI is going to be a generalist. So starting with just look at the economics, right, of your farm. Share some of the economics, and you can say, I have a friend if you want, type of thing, right? But then really kind of ask to solve back, what inputs do you need from me? I have X, I have Y, I kind of have this, like what's going to have the biggest influence based on it? And this ultimately as a grower. So I think it's really more asking the tool to kind of stack rank what's going to have the biggest input into, say, modeling, and just iterating on it over and over. I'd also recommend, try a couple of tools. Don't just try ChatGPT. Try Gemini, right? Try Grok. You will find these things and keep coming back to a couple of them, because literally in 6 weeks, one model may be actually significantly better than it was 6 weeks prior, where it was inferior to the other provider.
I think on one level too, if I could highlight, like, I think the other part is just very tactful, is just knowing where your data is, to get AI ready. Just know, okay, hey, what data sources do you have on your farm? Where's your soil test data? Where's your weather station data? Where's your irrigation data? How do you store and manage your fertilizer and your chemical inputs? Where do you have your fuel data? All these different sources you can use. Like, I mean, for example, if you have a system that you're tracking your gas by having drivers log in and do that, I mean, then you have a data input, you have your labor, your time clock, you have all these different sources. So I would just say, know your data sources, where they're hosts. You don't have to know how they work, you don't have to be the IT part, but just know where all the data is, so that you can get to it. So when this AI tool does come into play, you'll at least have a start there. Because I think one of the things that, like Steve and I have talked about this, I think one of the things that's different now than wasn't the case 2 years ago is that, AI does a really good job about data ingestion. And so like what I mean is like, okay, so I used to run and operate a soil testing lab here in Washington State. And one of the struggles we had with working with our partners was, how do we share data between different platforms? You have all these, every company has their own platform, and you have to have a way to share data back and forth. Well, the thing with AI that AI does well is it basically can act as a translator to take it from one system to the other. And so that's one of the things that I think is greatly changed now, that I think is only going to improve.
Yeah, I'm on the same page actually. What Steve and John said, I guess, right? Start generic, I guess, get general recommendations, and then knowing your pain points, see what data you need, and start investing in collecting that data. I guess, right? If you need to, for example, manage irrigation, start doing, putting soil moisture sensors and so forth. And again, as you do this, right, make sure that you are investing in vendors that like are plug and play, like they have APIs that can go and talk to the AI engines and so forth, not the folks who work in silos to some extent. And yeah, so I will build one step at a time. And if you're a small or mid-sized farmer, again, you're not going to have complete circle of monitoring and management, but at least start using AI for getting better decision out, and then develop better schedules, for example, for irrigation and so forth. So yeah.
What about you, Miel? I mean, you're coming from an industry where I'm not sure that the amount of data is necessarily there's a lot of data, right? A lot more data than we have in some of the other ag sectors today.
So what I see is that indeed people are doing an export from a CSV file or whatever file they have from a software in their industry, and then they dump it into ChatGPT. There's two things there, and that is indeed it will work. Two, if you do that with financial data, then you should be aware that at that moment you're putting your financial data available out there. We don't have, like most of the companies in my industry, they try to hold as long as possible on not creating an API, because they don't want the data to go out of their system, because they're afraid that somebody will get insights or start comparing. So we have an industry which is data intense, but people are reluctant to share. The farms want to share it, but they have a vendor lock-in with some of these big tech companies, and they are locked there. Is it changing? Yeah, bit by bit, because we have use cases. So when I saw what Steve was showing, yeah, this is indeed the direction that our industry should go, but we cannot, because it's such a, let's say, diverse area, let's say the landscape, the data landscape is so diverse that it's not possible. But it's definitely the way to go. Google is thinking about creating a multimodal prediction on everything that you have on your phone, everything that was ever collected somewhere in a hospital on you, and try to predict if you will live the next year. That's the ultimate goal that they have, or predict. But it's always about the data privacy. Do you want them to do it? So for me, it's different. I have farmers that are also skeptical, afraid to share, because what if suddenly a government starts asking to get access to those files, to those systems, to just monitor methane emissions or monitor animal numbers. So in my area, it's completely different. And farms that I work with, they are very, very reluctant and often scared to share it. So I don't know about, let's say, other industries. I'm very narrowly interested in animals with 4 stomachs and 4 feet. So that's my focus. I don't know.
Well, I think the blessing of agriculture is that regardless of what you're growing, whether it's an animal with 4 stomachs for milk production, or it's a blueberry, data privacy is always a concern. So, I mean, I think I think that's a really great point. I think that people are relatively reluctant with the chance that data could be used against them, or could be used to change the market forces. That's always a concern. So I think that's a pretty valid statement. We had a great question in the chat that I was going to go ahead and pull forward. And for those of you who have spent more times with LLMs, you quickly learn how to set up or word a question and how that makes all the difference in what the output is that comes from AI. So other than trial and error, do any of you have recommendations on how to ask more productive questions of your data? Because my only experience has been trial and errors.
Ask ChatGPT how to write a good question, and it will answer you how to write a good question.
That's true.
That's the stupid thing about it. It can do everything. That's the thing. These LLMs can really do everything. So ask ChatGPT, how do I write a good question to you? And it will answer. So,
wow.
And then I see someone else asking a similar question. Can an AI engine be instructed not to share the data? Yeah, you can try, but you don't know, because it's once you push it through their system, you don't have control about it. So maybe their prompt engineering ignores it. So we don't know. The only thing I think from that perspective, I think some of you might have seen, for example, Office now has Copilot, and then you have a work version and a web version. And the web version is in fact an open model, OpenAI it is probably in the back. And then the work version scans your documents. But honestly, I've been thinking about how they kind of do that. Do they have the separate space then for each user? Because if I start asking things about my colleagues, he does answer about it. So that's a part of the black box. Honestly, if you say that, I wouldn't trust, if I would say a prompt and say, please do not share this data, I wouldn't trust that it's not shared. And I see Steve say the same.
Yeah, I would be very careful with that. I wouldn't put anything into an AI prompt that you wouldn't want. Yeah, you see me really careful with it. I want to give really quick an answer to the question. I thought Miel gave a really good response. I want to give you an example of something that I toyed with when I was messing around with it. So in trying to get it to write a fertilizer recommendation, for example, if you just upload soil test data and say, hey, give me a fertilizer recommendation, it's not going to do one very well. But if you come and say, okay, I am in this region, I have this soil type, I am looking at this, and you kind of you give it parameters. So what I would do when I was in Kyrgyzstan is I would say, okay, they have very heavy soils, so meaning very high clay content and low annual precipitation. So I said I need a fertilizer recommendation. Please pull what references you can find that fit these parameters, these temperature parameters, these environmental parameters, and then I would comb through the resources it would pull from the Midwest, from the Northwest, from Europe. And then I would try to find which ones were the best. And then I would say, hey, I want you to use that model, or I want you to use that as the source data, and then train it. So that's just an example of writing a prompt. So my prompt then becomes like a couple paragraphs, right? Rather than just a great sentence. So
I think that brings up a great point, John. And, one of the things that was brought up by one of our committee members was, when you're using an LLM to make management decisions, do you worry about the type of information that's being used? Like whether it's an advertisement or if it's good management information from the region that you need to be in. And that's why I brought up that idea of kind of the sandwich where it's human, AI, human, because it really, and sometimes multiple steps after that, again, AI, human, because you have to keep going back to the data set and refining it using the information that you've identified. And so, given that it does become a prompt that's sometimes paragraphs long, right? It's not as simple as you're asking just a straight 1 or 2 sentence question anymore. And that is something that as people have an opportunity to take small bits of data and put them into a system, whether it's a public system, obviously the data privacy issues, making sure that you're using kind of non-confidential data to test the system. You could even come up with random information and put it in and say, okay, I've got soil tests that look like these 5 numbers, give me a fertilizer recommendation, right? And if you know what that recommendation should look like, then you can identify whether or not you're getting the right kind of feedback. But that is a hard skill. I mean, it takes practice. You got to spend time with it.
And I think the other thing I would add, Kelly, to that, just so people that know, I don't know how many people know this, but you can actually personalize ChatGPT. So you can go in the settings menu and you can give it parameters. So for example, I personalized ChatGPT to say, hey, only pull like peer-reviewed data or extension publications. I don't want stuff from Reddit. I don't want stuff from that. So you can do that when you set up ChatGPT. So and that would be, that would be a good question. You want to set it up, do what Miel suggested. Be like, ChatGPT, how do I personalize you so I get the results and stuff I want? I mean, that's what I would as soon like that's what I think when I saw the potential of it is when I went, oh, this is not just a search engine. If I put it in these bounds and make it personalized, then it becomes very powerful.
And to be fair, my ChatGPT is a 10th grade social studies teacher as I help my husband use AI in the classroom. And it's all trained to be, I'm a 10th grade social studies teacher, but it's for the same purpose with identification of primary sources and all of these other things so that the data he uses to build a lesson it follows those parameters, those sideboards that you can create. So there's a couple other questions in here. So obviously we have a ton of subject matter expertise on this webinar today. And so what do you recommend are some key subject matter or skill sets that the workforce, either new or experienced, needs? Not in AI, but so they can use AI and other knowledge tools properly. And one of the things that we just identified in an ag viability study baseline assessment the agency released yesterday, actually 2 days ago, it was that ag technology could be the difference. Steve, you showed some examples of that with gold level data and putting it in and using technology to find efficiencies to identify where in your system you're losing money or you could gain. And given that ag is really at a precipice. So what are some things that any of you can think about, especially Lav and Miel from the education space where you've got people, or John, from the packing house worker side? What do we need them to be able to do to be able to use AI? What are we looking for?
One thing is that when you think about students, you don't have to explain them how to use it. They know very, very well how to use it because it helps them solve their assignments, write papers. They know how to use it.
So what if you've got someone who's worked on a dairy for 30 years? How do you help them be able to use it as a farm manager?
I don't know, honestly. I think and if I look at what Steve's doing with the platform, that's where you help an older farmer use it and interpret it, because he looks at the numbers and he recognizes it. But to start from scratch, I heard people say you can use it to bring one system into the other and then convert it. I don't like the data literacy in my area is not high. Let's say, so we need to take that into account. They need, in my head, the only thing what they are interested in is, okay, good morning. What deserves my attention today? That's in fact the only thing what they want to know. What deserves my attention next week, or what deserves my attention next month? So the technical part, I don't know if they're interested. Maybe some are, but in my area or in my industry, I don't think they really are. They would love to know a little bit, but very easy talking to a chatbot, probably that's something they will do. But more than that, I'm afraid.
All right, Lav, I'm gonna tee you up on what we're seeing in the tree, fruit, and other spaces as well on that question.
Yeah, so and again, the answer is, we probably answered this question a little bit earlier. I think exposing our workforce, bilingual workforce, I guess, to these tools that are there, the AI tools, and then I think better prompt engineering, I guess, right? We did that for Hard Show. We had a session, and there was a lot of good feedback that we didn't know these tools exist. We don't know how to ask the question, I guess, right? And then these two things would get AI into the hands of the ag workers and the block level managers and so forth. I think at the same time, then I think when we're talking about stakeholders getting ready or making them ready for the AI tools, also telling them that, like when we are collecting the data, soil sample, plant sample, or deploying the sensor or reading the sensor and all these things, I think we need to make them aware that the quality matters, like what Steve is saying, the gold standard data. I think we need to make them sure, because for example, we have weather station in the orchard, right? And our temperature humidity probe in the orchard. And when you're spraying, right, it's going to be covered with the spray and so forth. So go back and then clean it after 2 or 3 days. So you're getting good quality data, and that data then drives your pest management decisions or any AI that is doing the decision making, I guess, right? So I think we need to start smaller, and then yeah, it will build up with the seasons and years, I guess, right? So yeah.
Okay. John, I see that you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So I'm going to restrict, that question came from me if you didn't see it. I'm going to restrict this follow-up to Steve and Jonathan. Let's forget for a second that we've just been talking about AI. What do you want in a new worker? Fresh out of high school, fresh out of college, no matter what kind of farming you're doing. And Steve, I know you've done a lot of consulting on a lot of different farms. What are some of the key things they need to know on day one?
Well, I'd say one, you want them to be intellectually curious, right? That's critical, and some people just aren't, or it's hard to coax it out of them. So have that be natural for them. Two is you want them to be comfortable with taking some risk conservatively, where and actually encourage them to take small, maybe even medium risks along the way where they can fail without it being a catastrophic failure, because that's the only way you're going to be able to put this to work for you. So I'd say those are a couple of big things. Obviously, having a good math background and good logic. I'm always a fan of somebody that has kind of an engineering mindset, because they've really been trained in trying to think through systems flow and put it to work. And then I would say last but not least, I love hiring farm kids because they're resilient. It doesn't matter. They're fine. They might grumble a little bit, but they're fine getting out there at 4 a.m. if they need to, or staying out there until 11 p.m. because they need to, because of environmental challenges and so on. And so that resilience, frankly, is really, really critical. If you've got somebody that is not willing to get out and get their hands dirty, it's really exasperating and frankly kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Thank you. Jonathan.
He said a lot of things I was going to say. My first thought was curiosity. I think you have to be curious, and the only thing I'll add, because for the sake of time, I think like you just need someone who also like will work. And when I mean will work, what I mean is the fact that like they understand that, hey, like I'm coming into the workplace here, that like I need to be able to learn how things work before I can be in a management position. Does that make sense? I think that's what we need. Is we need people who are curious, willing to work, and then every other thing Steve said. I think that's exactly what we're looking for.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. What about you, Scott? You're on mute.
I had an animal question for Miel, if that's okay. Because I don't get to think about animals as much as I do plant agriculture, but what are some of the things that you'll commonly want to learn from the animal behavior? And do you need a milking machine, robots and all that kind of stuff, or what?
What we want to learn is the what we call the phenotyping, and the complex phenotyping. So things which were typically difficult to capture right now, we could capture by, for example, using cameras. So there's a lot of people that are thinking about welfare monitoring, automated welfare monitoring, typically in animal space. That's something which is a bit of a, let's say, it's not a nasty word, but it's a word that gives a lot of people like immediately thoughts like, okay, we have to have all the thing on the farm, etc., etc. Whereas currently with the new techniques, if you have sensors and cameras, you could monitor very specific behavior that would be associated with negative or positive welfare. And then you would be able to say, okay, my animals are doing this so much of the time, and I compare or benchmark, and that's good or bad. Again, the sensitivity aspect comes in, because people are like, but imagine that somebody can look at that data well. That's some of the things we are thinking about, and people are trying to do sort of difficult behaviors that would be associated with negative or positive animal welfare. Can I come back to the question about what do you want them to learn? Today, I'm teaching a spring class at this moment, data science applications for agriculture. And the first lecture I give, they look at me and they say, what are we going to learn? And I say, I'm not going to learn you anything. You will tell me what you want to learn, and I'll learn you to learn. And that's a new skill set that we need. We need to stop spitting information to them, because that's something that ChatGPT can do so easy. They need to reason what is right and what is wrong. What can I trust? What can I not? So in the whole data science world, we need to learn them to learn. Like, they are unconsciously unaware about the fact that, yeah, when I was taught veterinary science, there was only one book, pathology. That was the source of truth. And now it's like, I cannot even think about what a disease is, or I get all these references. So students now need to be taught in a different way so that they know how to work with that. So we need to learn them how to learn. Instead of learning them, we need to learn them how to learn. So that was my feedback on the previous question. Sorry for taking that long, but that's how I look at it right now.
I think that's a really great point, Miel. Yes, I think the learning to learn is it's a really big deal with this next generation of workers and learners, especially. There was one question in the that was sent that's actually a WSDA question. And it was, is WSDA exploring opportunities to partner with third-party innovators such as ag tech companies, universities, or startups that are building AI tools for producers? I think our time spent in this webinar series with the Academy of Sciences is the first step in that direction of identifying what are the things that are needed, and is it possible for us to meet those through a public-private partnership that may include us, WSU, others. Certainly, Jordan is on the call from Ag Aid at WSU. I think we're really interested in what that looks like, and in identifying tools that will help farmers of all sizes be able to use new data analysis tools more successfully to keep their farms on the landscape. We haven't figured out what that looks like yet, but I appreciate the question, because I think we're still working through it as we work through some of this. It's all new. It's the first quarter. I definitely agree with that. So I love that. I don't think that California cows are really the happiest cows.
No, I don't think so. I think Washington cows are the happiest.
Washington cows are pretty darn happy.
Come on.
Maybe not after. And I will say, a great example of a time where you could use all of this great gold standard data is when you start to analyze what happens after a large storm event, like the storm we had here in December of 2025 with massive flooding events across Western Washington, big chunks of Western Washington. Like, I think of what you're going to be able to do with data tools, with AI tools, and questions you're going to be able to ask of your data as you see production changes going forward. And some of the work that we do to assess economic damages will change because of these new tools. We also have to learn how to learn that, though. So that's something I've been talking about a lot, is the impact on ag of big disaster events. So
I see somebody also asking about what do we need to learn, like what do we need to learn them? What's the knowledge base? I recently drew a graph of somebody saying that the only thing what we are sure about is that the knowledge base is becoming bigger. So we learn more and more and more over time. So the knowledge base in any domain is bigger, but we're still pushing an undergraduate or a graduate degree in 4 years, let's say, and then on top of it, 2 or 3 more extra years. So we keep that fixed. So how can we expect people to learn something which is growing, but the knowledge base gets bigger, but we still push it in less years? And okay, and now I'm going to jump in AI. I think AI could be the one that kind of helps to bundle that big amount of knowledge and condense it and make it available for people so they don't get overwhelmed with the base knowledge. But we need to then agree that some things we're not going to teach anymore, or we're going to drop some things. And that's very, very sensitive. Imagine that you would tell somebody we're going to drop them how to learn maths. Honestly, I think we're a few years away from maths being completely solved by AI. Even statistics, I'm surprised if you ask ChatGPT right now a statistical question, and I'm not saying that this is a good thing because I love statistics myself, but it's incredible what we can do right now. But then it's a balance between, do we want them to be more or less trained in things that an AI could do? I'm open to any suggestions there, and I know that this is sensitive, and some people think that this is personal in church, but we only have a growing knowledge.
No, thank you. That is the question, and that's a whole nother, that's not a whole seminar. That's 10 years of what the nationwide education system's been working on. So I mean, those are the kinds of things that why I wanted to probe to. The four of you had years and years and years of experience before AI got to where it got to. Okay. So the key here is just as Miel said, what are some of the baseline things that we need? And then the next question, and I know we'll follow it up in some of our next webinars and discussions, is what are we going to do with people who are, quotes, put out of a job by the fact that we can look things up faster? I mean, that's a key question. So thanks for these great talks. Thank you very much.
I think, John, you just segued us perfectly into ending the Q&A here. And thank you so much to the panelists today for providing your input, your insight, and your expertise. I think that I know I sure appreciated it. And I think it just continues the conversation we're having in this webinar series. So thank you so much, especially you, Miel, because I think it's like 10:30 there or something like that at night. So I do definitely appreciate it. Melanie, I'm turning it back over to you.
Yes, wonderful. My goodness, what a discussion, everybody. Thank you so much. I know everybody